Here with me today on our Visions and Voices podcast is a new friend of mine, someone we met a couple months ago, and I've been very impressed with the company she's building and the platform in the space here in the family office. And being general, because we're going to dive into it, so I don't want to give anything away. But Simran Kang, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much, Sean. I'm excited to speak with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So for everybody out there, give a little intro about yourself, quick little background, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, so by background, I'm actually an accountant by training. I started my career at PwC. Well, I'm a recovering accountant, is what I like to say. I started my career at PwC. I was there for almost a decade, and I spent most of my time there working with family offices and advising them. And then I left. I started a multifamily office with a good friend of mine. And that did really, really well. We had a great exit. And while we were doing that, we realized we were running into the same pain points we had at PwC. And that led me into becoming a tech founder. I never thought in a million years this was going to be something that happens in my life. And here I am running a tech company for family offices.
I love it. Recovering CPI. I usually say I'm a recovering engineer, right? That was where I started, but not what I'm doing now, obviously. So, and for those out there, I run I'm national leader for the firm in our family office industry space. And yeah, we came across each other a couple months ago, and I had a chance to get to know you and some of your colleagues. And I appreciate you guys came down to our Family Office Technology Summit. And I thought that was a great event, and it was great to have your participation. So thank you, because I knew you rerouted some things to make sure that we had some presence there.
Yeah.
Only got them there. So thank you for that. That was great.
Yeah. Our team was so excited to be there and just experience something different. Families want to have fun too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Creating something fun is important.
Yeah. I think that's what we learned. That was the theory going in, right? Was that particularly in this space, it's not business as usual necessarily, right? And these families or individuals, they want to learn and they want to network, but they also kind of want to have an experience or something fun. And we certainly accomplished that, I think, with how fast people were driving cars around the track. That was a little scary, but it was also fun. So, but let's dive into your story. So we talked a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little more about what inspired you to start MyFO and what specific challenges in the family office space were you going after as you went to address it? So walk me through the initial story.
So honestly, it was a very naive beginning.
Okay.
So, like many in the family office space, we were doing everything in spreadsheets. We had, so our kind of the lay of the land for the multifamily offices, we had a fund of funds, we were doing tax estate planning, and then we were doing governance strategy for the family offices and succession planning. So we had three arms to the business, and we wanted all of them to be able to speak to one another. And the challenge was we had spreadsheets and we're pushing data, information from one place. And it's by the time we would gather the information from the family, it would get outdated. And right. I honestly was there's gotta be a better way.
Because it's Excel hell for everybody. And this is the same story we've heard over and over again, and all kinds of stuff. Right.
Yeah. And it's even now, 90% of families still use Excel. And in my perspective, Excel is the new analog. Right?
Yes, I love that saying. Yes, I agree with you. It is the new analog. I'm not saying there's not a place for it, but there are better, more efficient options now.
Oh, absolutely. And so I thought, okay, if I can code these spreadsheets to have all these formulas, what if I just move this into a software? And then as I started thinking about it, I was for sure somebody's done this. I can't be the first person coming across this pain point. Went to the market, realized there were some data aggregators, but then they only did data aggregation. They didn't help you with document management. It wasn't a full operating system for family offices.
Yep.
So there was that gap. And then even on the data aggregation side, they were really expensive, 12 to 18 month onboarding processes. And there was no self-management. The family couldn't manage it themselves. They'd have to go to the advisor that would go to the tech company.
Yeah, and they get really in the weeds of old school training. You're you don't need to do that anymore. Yeah, it gives you a training manual with your iPhone. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And we figure out how to use it just fine. So
yeah, it has to be intuitive. And that's a core principle for us is having an intuitive product. And so then I was well, how hard could it be to build this, right? And so it started as something we wanted to do inside the multifamily office just for our own clients, and then didn't really have time to focus on it. Luckily, the exit ended up happening, and then got to roll into, I was sitting on this idea and I was like, I just really think people need this. Like my own family needs this, even not even as a family office. It's like,
Just
I
in
want
general to manage finances, right? I agree. Like
exactly. Like I'm
it
like,
can be
I don't
used for anybody really, but you're catering to the upper end of the spectrum. I get it.
exactly. And I was like, even with my own parents, I was like, I don't know where any of their stuff is. Like
Right.
if anything happened to anybody. So that's kind of, that was the origin, right? It was like, things need to be better for families, and everything we have going on and all of the emotional stuff that we're always working through. The last thing you need to do is like try reconciling an Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, and that's yeah,
It's
because you're right. It's new analog. The minute you create it, it's out of date. So
exactly.
that's if that's your normal operating process, you're spending an awful lot of time on something that's out of date. So
Exactly.
why not
Yeah.
find something better? No, that's great. So all right, so you dive into this. You
Hmm.
leave the multifamily office. You dive into this. As you're putting together your strategy, how did you or what were the differentiating values that you came up with as you were looking at the product and the space? Like what differentiates MyFO?
It's our speed and
Okay.
that the fact that it's intuitive. So the biggest thing is how quickly you can get onboarded and have your data on there and how easily it can be managed. And the fact that you can like collaborate with so many different individuals, like from the onset.
It seems super fast, super easy. I mean, the demo you guys walked me through, and I was
Yeah,
talking with Adam, but I mean, it's very clear how easy this is to put in place somewhere.
exactly. And that was like what we really wanted it to be. I didn't want I didn't want people paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for the subscription plus $100,000 to go get trained. And then you're stuck with this product that like I have families that have used some of those products or
Mm.
still do, and then they have added ours because they're like, it's too complicated. Only two people in the company can use it.
I'm not surprised you're saying this because it's funny. In December, I had a conversation with a couple family offices where honestly, I willingly mentioned you guys as an option because they were struggling with this fact of like,
Mhm.
we've got these systems, but none of us know how to use them. Our accountant can barely do it. And they're like, John, what do you do? Or what do we do here? And I said, well, guys, there are some lighter weight ones that are fast to use and actually plug over top things really nicely.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to kick the tires on it because I think you may find a little bit better. And you're right, it's intuitive. What I like and appreciate is that you built it with them in mind. So it feels easier to them. And
Yeah. And
I'm not
like,
surprised you're seeing a lot of demand already because I think you really absolutely isolated a gap in the space.
yeah. And one thing we did very carefully in the beginning was like, I didn't want to build something with the lens of being an advisor or being, because what we found in this space, which was another issue, was a lot of people that had built in this space had built for a different reason,
Yeah,
not necessarily for the families. So some,
I know. I've seen that too. And I feel like that's so, it's not authentic and everybody sees through it. So
yeah,
why would you do that? Yeah, I
and
don't feel like that's helpful.
some of them it's like they, they were pioneers in this space and they've done some good work, and they were aggregating data for hedge funds and they had a lot of hedge funds, and so some families went to them and said, you have all this data on one end, can you back into building a product for me? And they
Sure.
did do that for families, but that's not an efficient way of building technology. And so we wanted a very user-centric product. So we went directly to family offices. We interviewed hundreds of families.
I wish more people would do that because
Yeah,
that's what this is about. It's about persona development, right? Old
exactly.
school tech, it's basically going back to pure SDLC process on how you develop a technology product for
Exactly.
any industry, really. But you got to go to the customer and you've got to understand the segmentation of the customers.
Exactly. And that's what our core focus was. And then we had a handful of advisors that work with families we were very close with to then understand what are some of the additional pain points when you're dealing with the families are you seeing on your end. And so our product, the lens is always the family offices. And then we know that if we are the thought leader and we are building a product for that end customer, the advisors will come along. And so we have a dashboard for advisors to then add their families on there. But it is always designed with the families in mind first.
Which I think is, I mean, to me, it sounds like a no-brainer, right? And to you, I'm sure it does too. But the majority of platforms we've seen out there don't do that for some reason. I
No,
agree.
and
They were made for ulterior motives, it seems.
yeah, it's like I'm trying to sell insurance or trying to
Right.
sell investment products, or I'm trying to like sell lending or real estate or create some sort of marketplace. And the thing is, if you're not building something that is intuitively designed for human beings to use and they want to spend time in it, you can't cross-sell products on there.
No, and you'll never see the traction you want. Or if you do, it'll quickly fall off because somebody else can knock that out quickly, right?
Yeah,
You're leaving yourself open to a competitor to disrupt you easily because you're not minding the actual requirements of the market.
exactly. Yeah. And like, and I think what's interesting with families that we realized along the way is a lot of them don't actually feel heard.
Yeah,
And so,
I can appreciate that too. I think I've heard similar feedback as I think that's one of the reasons I identified with what you're doing really well. Armanino, we take a similar approach. We're not trying to, I like the joke, we do everything but investment advice because we don't even want to get into that space. It's so
yeah.
crowded. There's plenty of people doing it, but we're just trying to stay really focused on what we do well and
Hmm.
then service that and then listen to the client. So I can appreciate that. I get it. Like that's the
Yeah,
feedback we keep hearing. They don't feel like anybody's really catered anything to them.
absolutely. And like you're kind of nailing it exactly where the families care, which is like they want someone to come in, hear them, and then solve the problems they have in front of them. And I think like working so closely with families, like there was times we were like I was an accountant and I was like in the middle of like, you know, kids dropping out of college, and like the first
Right.
person they call is the accountant to be like, I might get kicked out of the trust. But like,
Right.
and so you end up doing these things for those families to build relationships and to understand what their needs are. And so that same thought process is when we build the technology is like, what's bothering the family members? What's the information they don't have? And how can we
Right.
help get it
What
faster?
is it that they need? What problems do they need solved? Not what we're
Exactly.
trying to solve for ourselves.
Exactly.
Not
And with
other
your,
means that we could sell to them with. It's what do
yeah,
they need, right?
yeah. And with controllers and CFOs, and there were so many things we were learning as we were talking to them about data reconciliation, K1 statements, and how, and it was like, and then we would have light bulbs that would go off, and it's like, okay, we're hearing this from 5 or 6 families or 10
Right.
families. And there's a very easy way in the product we can make this super intuitive. We would prototype it, go back to them, and they're like, I love that. Build that
Right.
for me.
I mean, if you're listening well, they're pretty much giving you your product roadmap if you listen well enough.
Exactly. Yeah. They will tell you exactly what they need because
Yeah,
they,
that's the beautiful part of the segment. That's tough to do maybe in other industries because there's a lot more noise sometimes from the signal. But I
mm,
feel like in family office, you can get to the signal pretty quickly, but you better be listening or you're just going to
exactly.
miss it, right?
Yeah.
So what
Well,
is your vision? Like, let's walk through it. So MyFO is out there. You're growing.
yeah.
What's the vision you see out there, and how does MyFO fit in that vision? Like, where do you see it going?
Uh, you know, I think as a founder, you need to be a visionary. Sometimes I think I teeter between this like niche I want to solve and having a grand
Which
vision.
is it's a hard thing. I think every founder goes through that. Like that's a because you have
Yeah,
to put the here and now versus out there, and they don't
yeah.
always the same thing, right?
And so I know when you go out and everyone tells you this, and nobody believed me, and I don't think people will still believe me until like years from now. But everyone's like, every family is a snowflake, every family is a snowflake. We are all very similar and we all care about a lot of the same things. And I think we are a lot more alike than we are different.
I 100% agree with that statement.
Yeah. And though our product works for large single family offices, we've designed it in a way that it's intuitive. It can be tailored to your need as a family, which allows it to be scaled down.
Right.
And so what works really well is when we do go to an advisor and you're a large institution and you have different types of clients, instead of having 5 different products that you now have to maintain for 5 different client segments, you can use one.
Right.
So this product can be pared down to a family with no entities, no holding companies. They have some personal assets, but they also have wills, they have other documents. And then it can be scaled up to business owners. And then it can be scaled up to family offices that own multiple holding companies, multiple assets, and multiple operating businesses. And it can become more complicated with additional features added on. And so that for us, the grand vision is that we want more and more people to think about their money like family offices do. Right.
I love that. Now that's the first time you have no use of that to me, but I'm not surprised you're telling me that because I
Yeah.
think that's a where generational wealth is moving, particularly, let's say, North America, but obviously other parts of the world too. That's what we're seeing is generational handoff now. As the generation more and more retires and starts to hand that, we are going to see that proliferate to a point where, yeah, it's not going to be, oh, do you have 50 million in investable assets or more, whatever the threshold is, right? That's kind of going away.
Well,
Everybody, if you could have 1 million or less than that, it's still like, hey, I need help doing this, and I need to have a
exactly.
platform that can be flexible to as that grows. I mean, I think that's smart. You're handling, you build a strong foundation, but then can be flexible to the needs of your specific audience there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was like a core part of our ethos in the beginning was like, how are we, like, if I take the lens of taking something so complicated and so difficult, and I think about democratizing this to make it easier, it's going to make it easier for everybody, including those like massive single family offices with, like, we have clients with hundreds of entities, right? 200 bank accounts that they're reconciling on a regular basis. And so I'm like,
Which is
if I,
crazy when you think about it, but yeah, that's true.
yeah. And so,
Yeah.
and you think about how much work that goes into that individual pulling information, and you're not focused on the value. Like, we want families to, and like, there's a lot of power in the money that they have, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people don't know, like, until you've been in the family office space, you don't realize how hard it is to move capital if you want it to like support different ideologies or like make social changes. But families end up spending so much time in administrative tasks
Yeah.
that they don't have time to be visionaries and think like, okay,
It's
how do I want my capital to promote something or make social change or any of those things?
I agree. One of the bigger ahas I've had being more intimately in this industry for the past couple of years now, one of the bigger ahas was that most of these wealthy people can't even see their overall portfolio of wealth. They don't
Oh,
have an aggregate view. They can't tell.
yeah,
They have no idea. And you're
they have
like,
no
it
idea
shocks
what
your
to do.
mind. You're like, how do you not like, I don't know where to go. And
There
you're
are
like,
families I knew they were a family that should have a family office or be a family office. And I've talked to them and I said, what are you doing in your family office? They're like, I don't think I'm a family office. And I was like, you own how many real estate
yeah,
buildings?
guess what? You are.
Are
You
you
may not have
operating
one, but you are.
businesses? Yeah. Yeah. And so they have no idea what they're worth. I remember when I first started in this space, the first family I worked with, the mom or she was kind of like the CFO of the family office. The father had started the business. And so she would literally send me paper bank statements every time she would remember an account. And she
Yep.
said, well, we have this account, but it's like a good friend of ours. So we put a little bit of money with him. We
Yeah, there's no approach around it. Even if they have a financial advisor, they still don't know.
And she had no time because she was the CFO of the operating business, but
Right.
everything that was personal outside of it, where they were investing here and there, it
And
was
then forget it if there's multi-generations involved, because then you've just
oh,
everything's spread out and disaggregated. And how do you get a full view of all the assets and where everything's? I mean, I think that's very difficult. And it was
yeah,
surprising to me to meet many people from billionaires down that were like, yeah, I don't know.
yeah. And you start talking about generational shifts now.
Hmm.
And so what ends up happening with families and a lot of these data aggregation tools is there's like a tool for aggregating the family office, right?
Right.
So, but what happens is when you've got like cousins, right? They're sometimes also entrepreneurial and doing their own thing, and they've got their
Right.
own money. So then they're logging into one place to see what I'm going to get from the family. Then you're reconciling somewhere else what you have as an individual. You have no clear picture of like
Right.
what you are. And so when we even built our product, I was like, I want every single individual in that family when they log in.
You should see the breakdown. They should see
Yeah.
what's theirs, what's going to be out, what's going to come their way if it's not there yet, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And
how do you
add their
trust
own
impact
stuff.
this, right?
Yeah. And add their own stuff and be like, now I see my family office. This is
Yeah,
what,
it's a view of your wealth and how you and at
yeah.
a top level, how are you using that wealth? What are you putting towards impact, like you said, or
Yeah.
nonprofit or foundation, whatever you, what are you putting towards your own play? You just want to have that available. And
Exactly.
what else are you
There's
trying to do? Do you have other assets you're investing in, right? Like, but it's hard to aggregate this. And
exactly.
I think
And
you're solving a massive problem out there because I think that's the overwhelming feedback I've heard is like, I don't know how to get that view.
exactly. And like, and and I think sometimes families like they do feel the burden of what they have to steward. and take care of. And oftentimes you meet them and it's like a deer in front of headlights. Like they just don't know what to do and what next step to take. And because it's like, it's just so overwhelming, you don't even know where to start. And allowing people to have a clean starting place and a tool where they can learn, and like allowing them a space to create like this exclusive community where they can talk to other family offices. Also, it's not my job to tell people what the right answer is, like how they want to invest or
Right.
do
Yeah,
it.
I'm with you. Like that's not what we do here. I
Yeah,
don't,
but
that's up for them to decide. But my job is just to make sure they can get everything they need to make that decision.
exactly. And like the tools, the resources, the education, like the network, and that's what we want to foster. And then, I inherently do think people are good and we do try to make good decisions, and I think they will. But I think what ends up happening is people don't have these tools, they don't have the capability of making decisions, and they fall prey to a lot of predatory like situations where they end up losing their money, or somebody's trying to make money off of them, making bad
And that's
investments.
just getting worse, right? Like that is not like, oh, that used to, no, these scams, I mean, this is a quick side note, right? But these scams are getting more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And that's, my guess is that's going to continue. So how do you help them? And platforms like MyFO can help that because you have one view of the world. And so you
Yeah.
can see what the impact is of any decision you're making versus, like you said, just thumbing it or having an Excel sheet that's out of date or really just having no view at all.
And very simple things like in the software, just having a benchmark to say, this is
Right.
what the asset allocation looks like. So when your friend comes to you and says, can I have $1 million? I'm doing a startup. You can look at it and say, what does a typical family allocate to venture angel investing?
Right. You have some information
And
to
it's
give
like,
you
it's a very,
context.
yeah. And you're like, it's a very small amount,
It's a
right?
super small amount.
And so you're like, okay, is this a big amount? Is this an amount I'm willing to lose? Like
Right,
that's
because most people have no context. They're like, I don't know if that's the right answer or not.
and they don't understand the risk profile difference between writing a friend a check for $1 million and putting $1 million in an EFT.
See, that's really because that's really the trade-off is like, hey, for them, it's all about the return on that, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and you should not saying you don't do it, but you should understand the trade-off you're going into.
exactly. And those are very simple things that like as this generational shift is happening, the financial acumen at the family office level doesn't always retain itself because you
I
have
would agree.
younger people coming in, they have different backgrounds, like they maybe went to school for something else, and you need to give them the resources to.
Financial literacy is an issue across the entire, I think all of the US and Canada, but probably globally too. Like it's just we are not good at it. It's not taught in schools, right? It's not something you come up with through middle school and high school saying, "Oh, I really learned how to balance a checkbook." Like
Yeah.
I don't know why we don't do that, by the way. Like I think
Well,
maybe it's
and
a
it's like,
separate project we can talk about, but why
yeah,
is
yeah.
that
It's
not
like
discussed at the
it'll
high
teach
school
you,
level?
but and that was like that's kind of our ethos. This is why there's this grand vision is like just imagine if people knew like not just to save, but like to invest, and like
Right.
the power that that has to, you know,
Time value of money, right? Like you teach people
exactly.
this because most people, and we're talking general population, have no idea what that really means or how to utilize it.
Exactly. And like, and then the power it gives you as an individual, if you have passive income, right? Like, what could you do? If you have the ability to invest in social causes you care about, what does that do
Right.
for you as an individual? Like, there's just like, there's so much advantage to thinking like a sophisticated family office and acting like one and having that data. And so I'm just like deeply passionate about giving people resources and tools to make a lot of that so much easier. It shouldn't be as hard as it is.
No, it really shouldn't be, and I agree. And I
Yeah.
love this. I love this perspective. I think this is partly why I'm a big fan of the product too, because I could tell quickly what you guys are building. I'm like, oh man, there's such a need for this. People need this, not because I think it's cool, just because I think there's a gap and people need this help. So,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
let's transition a little bit. I want to go a little deeper in this because I want to talk buzzwords now because you and I we hear it every
Yeah.
day. AI, AI, everybody AI, ooh,
Yeah.
AI.
I
Now,
know.
a lot of it's pie in the sky and none of it's relevant yet, but there are obviously applications that can be used right now. How are you planning to incorporate or have you incorporate AI into the MyFO space? Like, do you have a vision yet for it? And if you don't, I get it because it's early days in some regard. But
Yeah. So I was never popular growing up. And I just didn't always do the trendy thing. I was always very nerdy, and I'm like always going to be a nerdy accountant on the inside.
I love this. Okay, let's get
So we don't follow trends.
right.
I remember when I first had this idea, everyone told me build it. I think that somebody asked me if it was built on the blockchain, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, and it's not worth
Uh,
fighting. Yeah.
because I was like, that's not even how blockchains work. Like this is a SaaS. Like it's like this.
There's two different things. Just because that exists doesn't mean you need it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was like everybody was going crazy about crypto. This is pre FTX downfall. And everyone's like, you should just build a family office platform just for crypto, just for blockchain. And I didn't. I was like, I know my niche. I know
I'm
my
glad you
audience.
didn't. That would have been bad advice.
Yeah. And I know my family offices, and they are not heavy in crypto. They
No,
are
they're not.
all dabbling in it. They're putting a little bit of money, but they're not betting the farm on crypto. That's
Why
like,
would they? They've already earned that amount of money. They're looking to
yeah.
preserve it and increase the longevity of it, not more than
It's
that,
like
right?
it's
So
wealth preservation and it's longevity. And my customer segment wasn't crypto billionaires. It wasn't,
right.
right?
If it was, it's a very different story there. But
Yeah.
again,
And so then we never got heavy into that. When it came to AI, like I think AI is great, like in so many ways. I think it's also risky. I think we're figuring it out. And
yeah, it's very early days.
yeah, I am in lockstep with my clients when it comes into that. So again, when AI came out, everyone's like, you got to deepen, you got to build an LLM and blah blah. And I was like, it's not something my clients are asking for. So I'm not
And I
going to.
don't know how relevant it is. Like what I've found is that what I tell clients is very similar, Simran, is that AI sounds great and they want to know about it. And I say, here's the best way to think about it. You got to think about it in terms of really practical, boring ways to use it because that's the best value
Exactly.
you spend.
Yeah.
It's
That,
not
and
this pie
that,
in the sky. Tell me where I'm going to increase sales for one of my holding companies. Like, okay, guess what? It's not ready to do that, and you're going to waste a lot of time and money doing that.
yeah.
But
And
if you're like, hey, can it help me reconcile bank statements faster? Yeah, it can.
exactly. And so that's like the lens we've taken is where can we leverage AI to reduce administrative
I think it's an efficiency play.
burden? Yeah, exactly. It's an efficiency play. So where do my families need to spend more time? They need to spend more time in the decision making. Like if they've got operating businesses, AI doesn't know their operating business as well as they do.
Oh, they don't. And you're again, if you try to, you're going to waste too much time trying to teach it. It's
Yeah,
not ready to do
exactly.
that stuff.
I'm like, you don't even have the data yourself.
Right. How is
Like,
it going to get it?
how
Yeah.
is AI going to get that data? So let's start with getting you the
It's
data.
garbage in, garbage out, right? So like if you don't
Exactly.
have it together, that thing's not going to learn anything.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
we thought, okay, data ingestion,
Yeah.
like let's use AI where we can there. Let's use the types of tools and build the types of tools that protect our clients' data. Let's make it easy and efficient for them to aggregate and see the analytics that they need. The next thing we're building out is analytics on the data that they do have. So
See, I
where
think that there's value, there's discernible value right there. Right.
exactly. And so, and some of that is AI, some of it's just data analytics. And I
Right. It's
think
not necessarily AI. You're just making it easier for them to see the ahas out of it,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes it gets grouped into being like one big thing, but it's what we're doing is then presenting the data of where are you, what geographies are you heavy in? What currencies are you heavy in? And eventually what we will do is like add layers of AI on top of that to then give you macroeconomic views of you're heavily weighted in X, Y, and Z. These are some of the trending things that are happening in that space, things for you to look out for you to make decisions. You know, over time, it's like we're tracking your capital commitments, your capital calls. What's your liquidity like? Where are times you've had liquidity crunches and giving you information to then make better decisions
Right.
as you go through it. So we are very thoughtful in how we implement AI in our product and our customer experience. And so what we don't want to do is like put the cart before the horse and like we go heavy on the AI side. And A, it's things that our clients don't need. And B, it's really like sharing information that our clients might not be comfortable sharing with AI.
And you just said it, but I'll reiterate it. If it ruins the user experience, then it's not a value add.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So then I'd love to dive in more. Like, what are the biggest challenges you face trying to scale the platform?
So we've actually been growing at such an incredible rate
Right,
that
right.
we looked at the stats and we are actually the fastest growing family office solution in North America.
I
And
love that.
we've just launched to go international. And so I think our challenge in the beginning was people didn't really believe our product can do what we said it can do.
But it goes back to what we earlier said, that they've been, oh, lying is the right thing, but they've been kind of taken with all these other products that came out that really were meant for something else.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
yeah, the
I,
skepticism's there. I agree.
I had a partner from a big four accounting firm pull me into a room and had this like private meeting with me. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And he's like a national leader, a decision maker. And he's like, I need you to tell me if your product is stitched on the back end. And I was like, what are you talking about? Right. And I realized he was like, I just can't believe this works the way. And I said, you know what? Just try it.
Yeah, just use it.
I'm
Put
like,
your own
just
stuff in
use
there, or
it. Like,
dummy accounts, but like go
I'm
check it
like,
out.
I'm
Right.
like, you don't have to do anything. I'm like, it is as intuitive as I say it is. I'm like, you can personally log in. I will give you a login account.
Right. Go check it out.
Go check it out. I was like, I'll give you a demo account. Like, try it. Like there's a reason our customers are as happy as they are. And so, and I think when you really focus on your customers and you focus on your product, the rest really does come.
I completely agree. So we do something similar with our automation products for family office, right? Which are complementary to what you guys offer. It's the same thing. I get the same skepticism.
Yeah.
And I just, what I do is I just show them the actual bot working. I'm like, just go check it out. Go see it.
Yeah.
Once you
Yeah.
see it, you'll get it. It actually works. It's not, it's not a demo we created. It's the actual bot from a client that's allowed us to redact it to show it. But
Mhm.
so it's like, it's the real thing, guys. You're just seeing it work. And as soon as they see it, they're like, oh my God, it does work. Okay, yeah, I want all of that. I'm like, yeah, of course you do.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. There's no bait and switch here. These are actually really well made products that are working for very practical reasons. And I think you're right. It touches that nerve of, are you sure there's nothing else you're trying to get me on? You're like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just trying to improve your operation. That's it.
Yeah, and once we get a family onboarded and they're using it, it's like I remember one family like in our early days, we onboarded them and the controller in the family office was like, you can take the cost of this product out of my salary. That's how much easier it's making my life.
I'm not surprised they're saying that to you. That's great.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic. That's the feedback you want to hear.
exactly. And I was like, I don't need to hire a big sales team. Like my
No.
product's gonna sell itself. And like that, somebody like that just becomes such a huge advocate for us, right? Because they
Mhm.
are talking to other controllers in that
And
ecosystem.
that's more valuable, particularly in the family office space, is that word of mouth matters. They're going to check around at other families because they're not competing with each other. It's not a space that works that way, right? So,
No, they're very collaborative. It's
right, they
like,
want to know what other people have learned from. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
that's
that's been our, yeah, that's been a huge differentiator for us. And like like, I'm just so proud of my team and what we've built. And like, that's, when you hear such great things in the market about what your team's been working really hard for, I think it's like the most satisfying experience as a
Well, I
founder.
think also if you do the right things like that, it will emerge. It will shine over time across everything else that's not made that way. And you just
Yeah.
have to, it's about staying in the fight to show that, but which is tough for any startup, right? You got to keep bringing in the cash and capital to do that. But if you can make that last, that whole cash flow dynamic, it will shine over time because it is the better solution. And then it wins out, but it's getting through that. So, but question I'd love to hear, because I love asking founders this, what's the most rewarding part of building this platform? Like what keeps you motivated now? Because you're out the door, you're going, you're seeing the traction, a lot of things
Yeah.
to be excited about, but like what keeps you motivated?
I mean, there's always the like customers you talk to that are like that share that feedback of how much time and things it saved them. Or we recently just had a client that emailed and asked if they can renew for a 10-year.
And we'll take that any day, won't we?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm like, I don't know. I gotta check with
Like
them.
we've never
Allowed
done
to do
that.
10-year contracts. Like, but it was, they had warrants in the past that had expired because they weren't keeping track of them and options.
Oh, right. They
And
don't want to risk that because it's working. So
yeah,
why
and
risk it?
they used the product for just over a year and they didn't miss anything and they had such a great client experience. And I think as a founder, it's the customer experience, but it's really your team.
Mhm.
Like it's when you have these young, bright, like so much smarter than I am, folks like that are like
You're pretty smart, Simran, but sure. Let's go.
dedicated to, you got to meet my team, dedicated to like really solving things for their clients and learning and, you know, and I see them learning a lot about finance. And, you know, when they nail it with a customer and they get it right and they work with our product team to really deliver and they're excited to show up every day and do this, I think like it's such a rewarding thing that, you know, I literally still have photos of how I drew out what I wanted MyFO to look.
Really? That's cool. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
when I had this idea and the fact that these team members have like joined and like, you know, they have families and it's like startups are risky and they're like, I believe in it and we're going to take it places and they're the ones taking it somewhere and I'm along for the ride and that's the best feeling. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so let's go to the visionary side of you. You're the founder.
Yeah.
What do you envision this role of technology, not just MyFO, but in general, in shaping the future of private wealth management over the next decade, let's say? Let's look 10 years out. Where do you think tech's going to go in this space?
Well, I think over the past 10 years, we've seen more and more of a transition into what I would say is like democratizing private investments, right? So you see it with even angel investments. Like there used to be a small subsect of angel investors in the Silicon Valley like 20, 30 years ago that were making these big bets on the next big thing. And now you hear about everyone dabbling into angel investing from $5, $50, $100,000
That's
check.
become very accessible to nearly anybody who wants to be in it.
Exactly. And then you hear about, you know, products like Allocate where you can get fund of funds. And that was like even my first product in my
Yeah, it's
family.
funny. Most family offices, I feel like they start that way because they're overwhelmed. And I mean, like I said, I'm not an investment advisor, but I've noticed it. Like they just start with fund of funds. They're like, okay, well, we'll try and get access to that, which is
Yeah.
okay.
And
Cool to
that's
start.
what in our multifamily office, we started with creating a fund of funds
Oh, cool.
and it was for a small number of families. And then we started to like allow other people into it, like professionals that had saved money. And so you're seeing this movement of more and more people trying to get into these private investments. And a lot of it is driven by what do I know? So you will have people that have maybe made some money in real estate and they'll invest in real estate, or they were, you know, an early employee in a tech company and they understand maybe like HR SaaS products and they want to like invest in that, but they want to invest.
You invest in what you know. I mean, it's a smart way
Exactly.
to start for sure. So
Yeah. And so I think there's more and more of a trend to people investing along those lines and moving away from just traditional public equity investing. And I definitely encourage people to still do that. There's a different risk profile, so I'm not advocating for one way or the other.
yeah, you're not saying
Yeah.
one or the other, but there's a
But
plethora of options and
yeah,
looking.
and we're seeing a lot of that trend happen where people are moving more towards private assets. And when we look at family offices, a lot of the benchmarks we used to look at before, say it was either Tiger 21 or like the pension funds and things like
Right.
that and how they allocate, we find families are way more heavily allocated to private assets and public assets. They really think about some long-term low risk investments, but it's mostly a liquidity management. So like how much liquidity do I need for the next 3 to 5 years? And that's where and the rest of it is long-term patient capital and a lot of private assets. So I think there's more and more of a trend moving towards that, which is going to just increase like the demand for data in that space. And
I
it's
think you're right. Now, what I love about this is like
these,
it goes back to you're not selling investments, you're just watching data and reflecting that. So it's not
yeah,
like you're not trying to push anybody one way or the other here, which I love about it. It's like you have no skin in that game. So
no,
for you, it's just noticing what people are doing and you're aggregating and saying, hey, this is what looks like offices are doing right now. And maybe, yeah, as we start to segment them into multifamily or generational handoff, okay, you may see some different behavior there, but those behaviors are valuable to understand.
yeah, yeah. And as those trends are happening, we're seeing ancillary services. So lending on private assets and alternatives like, you know, you had Silicon Valley and First Republic doing a bit of that. And since they've like disappeared, you're seeing more people trying to get into that market because there's a huge demand for it. Because sometimes you can have a really, really good investment, but it it hasn't reached its liquidity point, but the fund is coming to an end. And
Right.
so how are you creating a liquidity scenario without maybe an IPO time
Right.
or an acquisition, but secondary markets? So you're seeing a lot of those things spin out. And so those are trends that we're seeing, and we're trying to find ways to like get our families access to some of those tools and services on an ongoing basis to help just solve problems for them.
I love that because I think at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about solving problems for the families that are, they have they have goals, they have things they want to achieve. And I'll go back to something you said earlier, we're all kind of the same for the most part. They are, right? They 70% of them, they're exactly structured the same or have the
Yeah.
same intent. Yes, there are absolutely differences on the edges because every family has unique profiles, but that doesn't mean the whole thing is different. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what you're catering to. Hey, I'm going to build the platform for that 70% that's standard, and we know that's going to be needed. And then we're going to cater to the 30% that we know we're going to have to add for certain segments over time.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And maybe we're just not the solution for them. It's like maybe if you're an edge case, you need that really expensive software that's super
could
customizable.
be, right? There will be
Yeah.
people that play, and you're like, fine, we don't want to do that because it's not going to be advantageous to the rest of our customer base.
Yeah. And I've had those times where I've said to somebody on a call, I'm like, I understand what you're looking for. Exactly what you're looking for is not the tool that we are. Like if you might actually be better off with an accounting software or something like that. But this is what we can deliver on, and what we're saying we're going to deliver on, we're going to do a really good job. But yeah, like most of the families, I'm like, you've got a holding company, you got some LLCs, you got a trust, a couple of trusts, right? Like I'm like, at the end of the day, you got a
It's pretty
foundation.
much the same,
Yeah.
roughly at a high level, the same. So I get in the weeds, it's different. We all get it. But
Yeah.
when you're building a product, you don't start in the weeds. You start at the high level to understand what's the makeup of this audience, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, let's wrap up with one thing. What's one piece of advice you would give a family office? Let's say it's a newer one, or it could be anyone, it doesn't really matter. That if they're hesitant about adopting technology, because I run across this almost every day,
Yeah.
what would you tell them?
Well, I think you got to really understand why you're hesitant, right?
Right.
Like, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of like what you're going to uncover when you actually have data and you're not in the weeds? Sometimes we like living in the mess, right? It's like when you go into somebody's room and it's a disaster, it's
Yeah,
like,
you're like, you almost rather not know.
yeah, exactly. So what are you afraid of? And if you're using cybersecurity as a reason why, I guarantee that notebook where you're keeping notes and you might lose it somewhere is a lot riskier than a product that has to deal with
Yeah, that's a
multiple.
single point of failure, right?
Yeah,
Just because it's
yeah.
analog doesn't mean it's safe or
Or
something.
your Excel spreadsheet that I
Yeah.
actually had my own accountant accidentally email something to me that was supposed to come to me to the wrong email address and spelled my last name wrong.
Oh,
And
good
so
Lord.
I was like, I think this is a lot riskier.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's
And I was
horrible.
like, and the amount of times I've had somebody hack into my Google Drive, like, I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't,
like
you
you
know,
can't
so
assume any of these things are really safe. They're safe to a degree, but none of them are. It's
yeah,
software. You build it, someone will figure out how to hack it. That's just how this relationship works.
yeah, and especially when it's not designed for that, right? So it's one
100%.
thing,
It's not designed.
yes. I'm like, if you're using a notebook or you're using an Excel sheet that you're emailing and whatever, there are no security guardrails, right?
Zero. Yeah.
Often we find that it's a lack of education is usually the reason why people don't want to adopt technology. And it's a fear of the unknown. And sometimes it's the unknown of like, what am I going to uncover once I actually have all of my family office data
I think
organized?
that's a poignant observation that
Yeah.
it's that ignorance is bliss kind of moment of like, gosh, if
Yeah.
I do this, I'm now going to know all the problems I have.
Yeah. I can't, the excuse can't be, well, I don't know where anything is and I don't know what's
Right. Because it
going on.
does become comfortable to say because you can just brush it off, but that doesn't make it the right answer long term.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some of that hand holding that we sometimes do with families can really help move the needle. And so, and if you are adopting technology, like learn about it, learn about what the options are, and really work with a team where you are going to feel supported, right?
Armanino. Oh, wait, what did I say? Sorry.
Yeah, because like that's a core part of it, right? Is like
Yeah.
you don't want to happen is you're adopting something you don't understand. You don't know
Right.
how to
There are
use.
experts out there that can help you in an unbiased fashion find the right answer for you so you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours debating it, going off of one reference or one person's feedback. Like go to an aggregator, go to people that know the space really well and get them to walk you through that.
Yeah. And like everything else, look at a few options and compare them.
Compare them, see what fits right for you. I mean, it's not gonna, may not be the answer for everybody.
Yeah. We sometimes say to families, we're like, run a process where you use our product alongside maybe another one. And, and I'm like, I fundamentally believe that my team will do a better job for you. But if we don't, then you should use what works for you, right? And that, I mean, it works well for us. And I think it really builds a lot of confidence with those families. But I mean, if you're not adopting technology, you're going to fall behind. And you will be one of those families where 90% of your wealth is gone by the third generation. Because if you
I agree. I think that's the risk they're really running, is that it'll run out statistically, it'll run out by Gen 3 because you haven't minded it. And tech now can help you, enable you to get those answers so that doesn't happen. But you really got to, right? You really got to lean in and learn and figure it out now.
Yeah. And families are moving so fast these days that if you're not using technology, like there's no way you can grow the wealth or preserve it.
And if you tell me QuickBooks is technology, I'm shaking my head. Shaking my head. That's not technology either. Like, no offense to them. I think for family offices that are growing and have more sophisticated answers, maybe that's a piece of it. And I'm not trying to make that an example, but the point is, okay, you may have some bespoke software we're using that you have access to accounts, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about aggregation, having a worldview, so you can make smarter decisions overall, and then you can use all these bespoke technologies to help you with that.
Well, and like
that's where this comes into play.
Yeah, and to the QuickBooks credit, they have a business and it works, which they track the cost of things. They will track what it cost you and what you spent. You can look.
Know what the tech is built for, I guess, is what I'm saying, right?
Exactly.
It's not built for family offices. It's built to track expenses. Okay, got it. Cool. And that's helpful. But you need MyFO and others to actually help.
That's exactly
what you're going to do.
We try to do. Like, we do have aggregation with accounting softwares like QuickBooks. I'm like, if you've already got your cost base somewhere, let's pull that in. But now let's mark to market. What do you actually have? When are you going to have a liquidity event? When are you going to have cash? Do you have enough cash? Right? Let's pull in all 10 companies on QuickBooks and aggregate cash. Because what's happening is you're looking at them at an individual level and you don't actually know what you have in total. At one point, most families couldn't tell you how much cash they have. They couldn't even tell you what they're worth.
Exactly. And that to me is always shocking. And people hear like, no, this can't be true. Like, it is though.
Yeah.
It's a more complex scenario than people realize it is, because of all the moving pieces and the speed to which you kind of highlight that it's hard. You need tools like this to help you.
Yeah. And it's like when you go to the gym, right? It's like, if you have it in your calendar and you're constantly looking at it, and it's like as simple as like having a scale in your bathroom can actually help you lose weight just because you have the data.
Right. It's awareness, it's habit, it's data, and you have to keep that moving.
And if you don't have a tool where you're constantly looking at your wealth and how it's changing, your spending habits, your investment habits, you're not gonna get fit. You're not gonna financially get fit.
I think that's a great way to say it. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining me here today. We could probably keep going, but I know you're building a platform. I don't want to take too much more of it, but I think we got to go on an education tour. We got to go educate people on this.
Absolutely. We're going to do it together.
I love it. Well, Simran, thank you for joining me today. This was an absolute pleasure. Yeah, I look forward to working with you guys more this year as well. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of what you're building. I think it does solve an open gap in the market right now. So, but thank you for carving out the time. I really appreciate it.